Hello, good evening. I would like to thank you for tuning back in to Poem Praise 2, and certainly peace and blessings be upon you. Now, as we move right along in the extraordinary African Americans, next is the Great Northern Migration. Now, until the early 1900s, most African Americans lived in the South. Many were the descendants of slaves, and they supported themselves through sharecropping. In 1879, prejudice and Ku Klux Klan violence caused a few thousand of these people, known as exodusters, to move to Kansas in search of a better life. The word exodusters, which comes from the biblical book of Exodus, means leave or go out, as the ancient Israelites were led out of Egypt by Moses. The word exit also comes from this. Now, in the early 20th century, things began to change. An economic depression from 1913 to 1915 caused cotton prices to fall, creating much hardship. This was made worse by an infestation of boll weevils that destroyed much of the crop. And in Mississippi, in 1915, severe floods destroyed homes and crops. Now, at the same time, Europe was engaged in World War I during the time period of 1914 to 1918. Now, even though the United States did not enter the war until 1917, the conflict kept millions of people from immigrating to America and caused serious labor shortages in northern factories. Black-owned newspapers, like the Chicago Defender, were quick to point out that a black person in the South who had been earning 50 cents a day could move to New York, Chicago, or Detroit and earn $5 a day. Now, when the word got out, it didn't take long before hundreds of thousands of African Americans began packing up and moving north. They found not only better pay, but also less prejudice and more political and educational opportunity. When the South saw that it was in danger of losing its labor force, people tried to prevent the blacks from leaving. In many areas, the Chicago Defender was banned. But African American people left anyway. When World War One ended, prejudiced whites in the North attempted to force blacks out of their new jobs. There was violence and rioting, especially during the summer of 1919. But the African Americans, especially the black soldiers returning from the war, refused to return to the old ways. The Great Depression of the 1930s threw thousands of people out of work and forced many northern factories to close. And as a result, the migration of black people slowed down. But it expanded again during World War II, which was 1941 to 1945, when thousands of men were shipped overseas to fight, and factory owners were desperate for workers. The movement of hundreds of thousands of African Americans changed the racial composition of hundreds of cities, stimulated black artists and writers, and gave black people much more political power. It was a good move all around. And that sums up the Great Northern Migration. So certainly peace be upon you until we go to our next section in the Extraordinary African Americans. So what's coming up, stay tuned, is going to be James Weldon Johnson. Now, he was a writer, a songwriter, civil rights leader, diplomat during the time period of 1871 to 1938. So stay tuned, and I'll speak with you a little later in just a moment, all right? All right. Later.